Welcome back, fellow travelers. I have for you today a discussion point that was raised to me in one of my previous videos. I'll read the question out and pretty much base the video around this, and it involves fear of flying or the state of an aircraft. So specifically, it was posted on my Air Canada Rouge 767 review, and Polish Girl 90 asks, "Hey, I am usually scared of flying. It takes a toll on me. I am flying Air Canada Rouge to Europe this summer, and I've seen horrible reviews. My biggest concern, though, is an old plane. How is yours?" So I'm not going to touch on, well, I'll touch on how was my plane. Let me just put this phone down. The plane itself, yeah, the Rouge fleet runs a older aircraft than, let's say, Air Canada mainline. Although I'm going to be straightforward with you, Air Canada is one of the safest airlines to fly on, and that extends to Air Canada Rouge. One of the big things that Air Canada is noted for is just, their upkeep of aircrafts. Now, I'm sure there's going to be somebody watching this right now who's going to be like, rolling their eyes, well, they had a flight delay because of a mechanical issue, and all sorts of things. Well, that just goes to reinforce a lot of the points that Air Canada is very above and beyond their safety regulations for the aircraft. So you will sometimes see aircraft delays or maintenance delays because of what they deem faulty equipment, but it theoretically would be safe to fly on another airline. They just take that extra step and ensure their planes are tip-top. Now, that's not to say the other airlines don't do it. Just one of the things I've noticed, speaking with engineers and mechanics that have worked on Air Canada airplanes, generally speaking, that it's always been favorable. Not generally speaking, it's always been favorable. Look at its history. Very few incidents. One of the safest airlines, I would say, that you could fly. So with that said, that part of your question saying, how are the Air Canada aircrafts or the Rouge aircrafts in particular, they're fine. For anybody else right now that's watching and they aren't really concerned necessarily about Air Canada, but they just want to know about fear of flying. Well, I mean, it's been said, I think it might even be an urban myth where apparently your odds of dying are more probable going to the airport than actually taking a flight. Don't know if it's an urban myth or not, but I do know that out of the millions and millions and millions and millions of flights that take off every year, you hear of very few accidents. Now, this might not console you much because you might be that one person or on that one flight, not one person, but that one flight that happens to go down. And as unfortunate as it is whenever a plane does crash, it's so irregular and nothing that ever crosses my mind, knock on wood, that I don't go down on the next on the next plane. It's not something that I ever think of. So I'll be quite frank and say, when you're on board, the thing that's probably most dangerous is turbulence. And there are ways of mitigating that, by having your seatbelt buckled at all times, by making sure that the overhead bin up above you isn't over full or full of heavy bags. Those should be put on the seats underneath you, in front of you. There should not theoretically be that many other issues. I mean, your leg could be sticking out and get hit by a cart. All those types of things are the things you probably should be worrying about. You look at pilots, flight attendants, their job is to fly, half of the year, essentially, depending on what their routines are. I have dated multiple flight attendants. I have an aunt that's a flight attendant. I have two friends that are captains. One's a first officer. The amount of flying that they do, it's insane. Now, it might not console you knowing that all these flights take off. You just have to mitigate yourself. If you're uncomfortable on long hauls because you don't like being cramped up, take a few different flights to get to your destination. Sure, it'll take a bit longer, but it'll ensure that you can get out of the aircraft, stretch your legs a bit, maybe even make it a small trip. Let's say if you're going from St. Louis to Paris. Bad example might be, go to Iceland for a layover. Good example might be, stop in New York for a day and then take off again. After that, have a little trip in New York, and then your flight from New York to Paris would be a lot better. Vice versa, coming back from Paris, going maybe to Toronto. Stay in Canada for a bit, and then after that, go from Toronto to St. Louis. That's one way of looking at it. One of the greatest things that strikes me is people letting fear control themselves and missing a lot of great opportunities. I've got one of my friends who hates flying. He hates it. He avoided flights all the way up until he was married and had to go on his honeymoon. Tried to convince his wife that, they didn't have to go anywhere. Eventually, the wife put her foot down. They ended up going overseas, and he had told me that the flight ended up not being that bad. He didn't like the flight, but it wasn't as bad as he thought it was going to be. So he learned the lesson, like, okay, well, maybe I'll try to take smaller flights, get used to it. And I would say, don't maybe head to Hong Kong, Fiji, Australia right away if flying is not your thing. I would say, take a small flight. Go to a city that's a few hours away. It might be a 2-3 hour plane ride on one of the puddle jumper aircrafts. There you'll see, like in the small aircrafts, you'll experience turbulence a bit more frequently, but you're not going to be confined to an aircraft for that long. You'll see how you can gauge it. Then move up to the bigger flights. Maybe a 4-hour flight going, from LA to New York, or LA to Florida, whatever. You don't have to go to LA or from LA. Just saying. It's just work your way up. The more you do it, the better or more comfortable you'll be with flying. And from there, I'd say, a lot of people I know who are nervous flyers take, like a sleeping pill or stuff like that. I wouldn't really advocate that. I don't like taking pills at all, even like Advil and Tylenol. My parents used to hate me for it when I was growing up, because I would be like the most whiny person in life when I'm not feeling well. Well, I still am. But to say that I'm not an advocate for taking pills, but, whether it's, having a nice drink beforehand or bringing something on board that comforts you, whether it's like, something like a fidget. So, one of those little dice things that you can just fidget around and get your nerves out, or if it's, a comfortable shirt that you can wear underneath, or hey, maybe it's even a teddy bear or a blankie. Whatever makes you feel more comfortable to help you get through the flights, that's what you should be focusing on. Don't focus on the state of the aircraft, especially if you're flying with Air Canada. Air Canada, in my books, I would trust them in my life any day of the week, every day of the week. With that said, I would love to know what you all think about, a fear of flying. How have you overcome it, or how are you trying to overcome it? What's worked? What hasn't? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear it. In the meantime, if you'd like to check out some of my other videos, you can do that right there. And if you'd like to subscribe, you can do that right there. It not only helps the channel, but it lets you know when we upload new content. Until next time, safe travels.